just so everybody knows, in order to make and be more efficient, I'm going to go ahead and stream our classes on YouTube, because that way I don't have to upload the lectures and do all of the stuff that is needed. Do know that I will pause it and turn it off when I stop sharing the screen, so that I make sure that we protect your privacy and keep everybody safe and off those types of media sites if you don't want to be on them or recognized on them. So just wanted to bring that up because it's something that makes it much easier on my life to do. So, but let's go ahead and start talking about, so as I mentioned before, where we ended is we stopped talking about the different stages of sleep, okay? And we talked about REM sleep versus shallow sleep, deep sleep, and kind of the differences. And the thing that I want to make sure everyone knows is when we're asleep, our brain remains very, very active. If you look at our hearts and our lungs, we always think our heart pumps 24/7. Our lungs are taking in oxygen 24/7. The other systems in the bodies can kind of shut down because they're not necessary at certain points. But our brain is just like our heart and our lungs. It never quits. And it kind of makes sense because it's also what keeps the heart and the lungs working like they're supposed to be. So I hope our brain does not shut down when we sleep, because our heart will stop and our lungs will start breathing. But my point being is that for a long time in history, it was assumed that when we're asleep, our brain goes to sleep. But what goes to sleep when we're asleep is our body, not our brain. And I just want to emphasize that, because that goes into our next topic about dream states. Okay, so just to give a definition of dreams, and I'm going to kind of read the slide. I apologize for this. Dreams are a product of consciousness during sleep in which a person confuses images and fantasies with reality. Okay, I'm going to read that again because I want you to think about what this is stating. Dreams are products of consciousness, what we see in conscious reality. But during sleep, a person confuses the images that flash within the brain and the fantasies we have with reality, okay? And just an interesting note, on average, again, this is average, people will spend about 6 years of their lives in a dreaming state, okay? So we spend about 6 years dreaming during our lifespan. But again, I'm going to say this is average. There's a lot less and there's a lot more. And if we were to talk about it developmentally, we do see periods of life where there's more dreaming and there's less dreaming and the like, and it really has to do with life experiences people are having. But we'll talk about that when we get to the developmental section, okay? People dream while sleeping. It's believed that we dream when we're in REM state the most. But there is also, and this is a fairly new finding. Traditional findings on sleep find that it was only the REM sleep that when our eyes are moving rapidly, and I said it's kind of cool, 90 minutes after your roommate or someone goes to sleep, you flash a light and you can see their eyes moving back and forth. That's REM sleep. Traditional research has shown that it's only during REM sleep that we dream. But we find that you also dream during light sleep and deep sleep, or what's called non-REM dreams. The difference is during REM sleep is when we have the really bizarre dreams. All right, so I'll bring up a dream that I had last night. My dad passed away several years ago, but I had a dream that he didn't show up for family photos because he just had surgery to change his skin pigment to green. Not really normal, very bizarre, okay? But there's also non-REM that happens in shallow and deep sleep. And these dreams feel normal, like everyday life. And so I'll bring up a situation with my spouse. She's had some employment issues and stuff like that, and was very dissatisfied with the situation. So she left the job that she was working in over 2 weeks ago. But she still has very realistic dreams about her going to that job place and working. Even though we're 2 weeks out, we left it behind, it's over with, she still has very realistic dreams. She stated sometimes that she woke up feeling like she just got off work. Okay. These dreams are occurring in light sleep and deep sleep. REM sleep is kind of that in-between point, okay? So those dreams that you feel like, and I do this with new jobs and everything else, I always feel like I'm producing something in reality. When you wake up in the morning feeling like you just got off work or you should be going to bed, those are those type of dreams. The bizarre dreams like my dad having surgery to turn himself green because he thought he'd look better, those occur in REM sleep, okay? So what are the areas of the brain that are associated with dreams while we sleep? Well, we know that, and I'm going to kind of circle these because they're pretty significant areas. If you remember from when we talked about the biological aspects of psychology, this prefrontal cortex, specifically the bottom part, okay? Remember, the prefrontal cortex is associated with higher thinking, such as thinking about our social life and our social interactions with others, appropriate, inappropriate behaviors, our identity and our identity with others. It deals with if you were trying to solve a physics equation or a math equation, that is the prefrontal cortex, okay? Areas of the brain that are less active, that a lot of people think should be active, or less active, I'm sorry, the prefrontal cortex is less active during this period, okay? So that area of the brain that is really thinking rationally and about human relationships is the least active area of the brain. I'm sorry, I apologize about that. The areas that are most active are the motor cortex. Why? Because we imagine ourselves in motion when we're dreaming. We feel the sensations. Has anybody ever woken up because they felt like they just fell down? And you actually feel the physical sensations of falling down? That's because your motor cortex was active and you were in shallow sleep. And so the sensation of the brain set that you just fell, okay? The other area of the brain that is very active is the visual cortex, which provides the images, sometimes vivid, sometimes vague. As I mentioned, my dream states the other night, my dad was very green when I finally got a hold of him. In my wife's situation, she visualizes very vividly about being at that job, at that location. The other area of the brain that is very active when we are asleep is the amygdala, okay? So again, I just want to note this. The amygdala is associated with emotional states. It's associated with our serotonic system or the serotonin system. But I want to just highlight the very specific emotions that the amygdala comes most active, and that is during fear states or danger states. Okay, so when we have dreams and we feel that anxiety, we feel like we're running away from something, we're working in a working environment that is very traumatizing for us. The amygdala is going to come very, very active because it's responding to that fear, aggression, that I need to be alert and active state. Okay. The other area that becomes very active when we are dreaming is the brainstem. So the usual things we associate with the brainstem is autonomic functions such as breathing, heart rate, even though it's the thalamus that regulates body heat. This is the system that releases the hormones to make sure our body remains in balance, all of those things. But the other thing that the brainstem is associated with is intimate romantic love. This is the area that becomes very, very active when you're looking at that guy, girl, or non-binary person, and you're looking, oh, I want them. And they become to your immediate attention. And they're the ones who you swoon over and want and desire, okay? That's what we call romantic love, right? The other thing that the brainstem is associated with is sexual desire and sexual drive. Okay, now don't confuse the two. Romantic love and sexual fantasy and sexual needs occur in two very separate areas of the brainstem and go along very different neurological tracks in the brain. Sex and love are two separate things. But this is another area, and this is why a lot of people will report having sexual fantasies, sexual dreams, and those kind of things, especially in adolescence, when this area of the brain, adolescence into young adulthood, because this is when this area of the brain is the most active. And as I said in the developmental psychology, in women, it becomes very, very active in your 60s. But so does that romantic love area, which includes, yes, I hate to say this, your exes, your bad relationships, along with your good relationships. So if you've had dreams about an ex coming back into your life and whatnot, or some bad experience like that, that is that area of the brainstem that is being activated, that then is talking with your amygdala, going, oh, here we go. And we re-experience that in the visual and motor cortex. Okay, so these are the areas we know come active, and kind of the associated types of dreams we have really have to do with these areas that become active. I want to go back to the prefrontal cortex, because this is why a lot of dreams don't seem very rational. Most dreams seem very disconnected. They don't necessarily follow a storyline, and all of those things, because this area of the brain is what controls that consistency of action. When a person says, I dreamed something from beginning to end, it's because they're recreating it in their prefrontal cortex, because they want to make sense of the dream that they had. But if you train a person to actually report what they dream, it looks very, we're going to talk about a disorder known as schizophrenia. It looks like the disorganized thinking of someone who has the disorder of schizophrenia, is that you don't start from A and end with Z. You go to A, you go to B, you go back to A, maybe you go to F, and then you go to C, and sometimes you don't even get a conclusion. But when we wake up and we try to rationalize our dreams, we try to give it a timeline and to give it a beginning and an end and some type of rational explanation. So I just want to make this very clear. Our dreams are not rational. And when we train people to actually give us what actually happened in our dreams, it looks very disorganized. Hence, my dad had surgery to turn himself green. All right. What do dreams mean? Okay. And there's a lot of different theories on this, many of them going back to Sigmund Freud, that ideas that dreams represent some type of hidden conflict, that objects in the dream have some special symbolic meaning. So if you read his interpretations of dreams, he'll say, the snake represented a phallic figure that you're either trying to control or escape from. The whole, now I won't even, the whole is representing the female organs. And he goes down that route with Freud's psychosexual theories. Okay. But his theory doesn't have much evidence or much proof. There have been other people who have said that dreams have a manifest content and what's called a latent content. Manifest content is the way visual information is seen. It's how you actually remember it as a dream. The latent content is the meaning behind what is being visually manifested. So there are some theories out there that says, yes, so the weirdness of your dream represents something that is going to happen or is sending some messages. I'll bring up my spouse again. So she comes from the Mexican culture, the Latin culture. And when I expressed to her that I had dreams about my dad or I had dreams about my mom, she's like, oh, someone's dying soon. Or you're gonna die soon, because that's what that means. That's the latent content within my dreams. Okay. And I know she's saying it jokingly, but it's part of what a lot of people believe about, if you see your parents who have passed. In this case, my mother was involved in my dreams, so my wife was like, either you or your mom are going to pass away soon. She didn't say it seriously. She said it based on culture and cultural beliefs. But that's the difference between manifest content and latent content, what you see versus what that dream was meant to say. There is kind of more of a biological theory that makes a little bit more sense, according to a lot of research, which is the activation synaptic theory. That dreams are a result of the brain's attempt to make sense of random brain activity by synthesizing those activities with stored memories. Okay, and I'm just going to read the second bullet point. Brain imaging methods allow researchers to study content of dreams. They found that brain activity associated with the content of a dream was very similar to the activities observed when people were looking at the related pictures. Okay, so what this theory suggests is that when we're sleeping, our brain is trying to make sense of random different thoughts or experiences we had during the day. Okay, and so it's trying to say, what is going on in the mind? Why are we constantly ruminating about this when we're in our conscious world? And then the brain during night, and we can see this through brain imagery, is trying to connect with different synaptic memories to help kind of us make sense of what has been going on. So again, I will bring up the two situations with my spouse and myself. One of the recent events I've had in my life is I've had some conversations with my son and my wife about how I've never mourned my dad's death. It's something that happened 9 years ago, and I've never spent the time to reflect on what that meant. And I've been spending time talking with my wife and chatting a little bit with my son about this. And that randomness of bringing this up, according to this theory, is my brain is trying to make sense of why this is going on. In my spouse's world, again, hers are more reality based. They're happening in either deep sleep or light sleep. But the work that she just got out of was extremely stressful and traumatizing. It wasn't what she was expecting to be able to do in the position that she was granted. And so she spends a lot of her day thinking about, what did they do wrong? What did I do wrong? Doubting herself, understanding where she is as a professional and as an expert. And when she's sleeping, her brain is trying to make sense of this because she's experiencing something we'll talk about when we get to the cognitive section, cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when we have an expectation of what should happen, how we should be, and the behaviors and experiences we have. And when that occurs, when there's a disconnect between our goal-planted ideas and our world, it creates stress and it creates anxiety. And what we need to do is resolve that conflict. According to the activation synthesis theory, it's the brain at sleep trying to resolve that conflict between the experiences she had and the expectations and everything that she learned and gained an understanding of, and that created conflict. And now her memory system during sleep is trying to resolve those issues. Okay. All right. So that's what we know about sleep and dreams. I will say again, it's about a consolidation. What we know best about dream states is it's a consolidation of memories in order to help us make sense of random events that are occurring in our life that are creating different scenarios for us that we need to resolve. That's really the best theory we have about dream and dream states. Now, I do want to talk about sleep as just sleep, and talk about sleep as an adaptive behavior. Okay, and I'm going to highlight three basic theories on the benefits of sleep. One is the restorative theory. Sleep allows the body, including the brain, to rest and repair itself. We do know that the body does, when we look at cell repair and those types of things, this happens during sleep. We know that what you learn during the day gets consolidated while your brain is processing it while you're asleep and you're not attending to it, those types of things. There's also what's known as a circadian rhythm theory, which sleep has evolved to preserve animals, including humans, from harm, danger of attack, usually at the greatest when it's dark. So it's adaptive to be asleep at night, especially the predators of the world. Consolidation theory, this is circuits wired together during wake periods are consolidated. This kind of goes back to the restorative theory as well. This is when the brain cells are really either strengthening or saying we don't need that, or we need to make information in our brain more efficient. And we also know that sleep deprivation can impair functioning, okay? Most studies find that 2 and 3 days of sleep deprivation have little effect on us, on strength, athletic ability, or performance on complex tasks. But sleep deprivation beyond those 2 or 3 days, we start to see a decrease in things like athletic ability and cognitive ability to solve, for example, complex tasks. But we also know that Sleep deprivation also has different effects on individuals. For example, when after those 2 or 3 days, even though we think that we're in a complete conscious states, our body automatically goes into what's called micro sleep states, where we think we're consciousness, but our brain thinks that we're asleep. And we're going to look at a disorder here in just a minute that kind of highlights this kind of issue. Long periods of sleep deprivation does decrease, as mentioned, cognitive performance, hippocampus activity. Remember, hippocampus from our lectures on biological psychology deal with memory and memory formation and memory activation. We also know that it interferes with things like hunger signals. And we do know that sleep deprivation contributes to, for example, overeating and weight gain. Sleep deprivation is associated with negative mental health, as we'll talk about at the end of the course when we get to mental health. We find that first semester college students who use their devices at nighttime had poor sleep quality and therefore poor academic performance. Sleep deprivation deprives the brain of REM sleep specifically, which we have a lot of evidence to suggest it's when REM sleep is when our memories and our neural signals, our neural connections are being strengthened and developed and formed. So how should we use psychology in your life? How do we get better sleep so that we live better and more conscious and alive when we are awake? Establish a routine and set your biological clock. Avoid things like alcohol and caffeine in the evening. Avoid electrical devices late at night. Exercise regularly. Allow the mind to associate bed with sleep other than other activities. Relax, get up. And the last one is let bygones be bygones, meaning that other people who say that you shouldn't need to sleep that much, or if you sleep too much, that there's something wrong with you, get the amount of sleep that you're supposed to. And this is where I do want to bring up, because traditional research on the subject suggests that everyone should get 8 hours of sleep per night. When we get to the developmental section and we look at physical development, we're going to see that on average that is completely wrong and is misguided. In fact, what we find is that for a lot of individuals, for example, in their 30s and 40s, should be getting around 6 to 7 hours of sleep. Any more or less than that is what's causing the tiredness that a lot of people in middle age experience during the day. We will see that in our teen years and our adolescent years, we should on average be getting 9 to 10 hours of sleep. And it should really be based upon the circadian rhythm of when the sun sets and when the sun comes up. And we'll look at those different things when we get to the developmental section. I do want to bring up just a couple disorders that are related to sleep. The first one is insomnia. Every one of us will experience some form of insomnia sometime during your life, okay? Whether it's just one night of not being able to sleep, or if it's several weeks or the like. But about 12% to 20% will experience what we call chronic insomnia, meaning that we're not able to fit a regular sleep cycle for 6 to 8 weeks or more, okay? We do know that there is gender differences in this, in that women are more likely to experience insomnia than men, and older adults are more likely than younger adults. We do know, so that list we looked at before can help with treatment of insomnia. But we has also found that there is a lot of medications and everything, but once a person stops taking that medication, they re-experience the insomnia. Plus, there's also the risk side effects. What we have found non-medication wise that really helps with insomnia is cognitive behavioral therapy, which we'll talk about at the end of the semester when we talk about effective therapies. But really what it's about is letting the mind rest, getting rid of bad thoughts, and changing behavior. We find to be the most effective treatment for insomnia. Two types of other sleep disorders is sleep apnea. This is when a person stops breathing because the throat closes. The condition results in frequently awakening and disturbing the sleep rhythm and the sleep cycle. And so people wake up not feeling like they slept well. They tend to have greater cognitive decline and harder to stay awake. It's also a deadly disorder because if the throat becomes blocked when the individual is in deep sleep, they're at risk of death. Narcolepsy is a person experiences excessive sleeping during normal wake hours, sometimes going limp and collapsing. My dad actually had narcolepsy. This is the individual who just randomly falls asleep. Even if they're in the middle of a rock concert, they might just kind of doze off. At my dad's height of narcolepsy, he would fall asleep at stoplights, and he would fall asleep while he was driving. On average, he would sleep about 16 hours of the 24 hours of a day. What narcolepsy is when the person is awake, the brain thinks the body is asleep. And when the person is asleep, the brain thinks that the body is awake. And so it creates this confusion that the brain constantly wants to shut the person down during waking hours. And it causes a lot of issues. And usually it involves overexciting the individual. So, for example, with my father, if you got him too excited by telling a really funny joke, he would lose complete and total muscle control. And then he would fall asleep. Okay, so that's narcolepsy. It's where the brain has miswiring about when the person is asleep and when the person is awake. Okay. Now, we do have some other related, so REM behavior disorder and sleepwalking. And I think we kind of talked about this last time. REM behavior disorder is roughly the opposite of narcolepsy. Those with this disorder act out their dreams while they're asleep. That area of the brain that shuts down motor control is absent in these individuals. So they often have sleepwalking. Somnambulism is relatively common and occurs in slow wave sleep, typically within the first hour or two of sleep. So these disorders are really about when the brain is asleep, it remains active as if the person was continuing with their awakened behaviors. Again, most people will have experiences of sleepwalking. In young children, many young children have what's called sleep terrors. It's when the child wakes up and they're in a complete terror state. Okay. One thing that you should note, and it's really important to state this, is when a child is in a terror state or in a sleepwalking state, our job as the observer is to keep them safe. Okay, because in the terror state, it's not actually that they're dreaming about a horror show or something like that. It's just that the brain, the amygdala, remember the amygdala becomes very active, especially in young childhood. And so when that becomes overly active, it creates fear and terror in the individual. And so they'll automatically wake up in a terror state. Sleepwalking, the reason why it's recommended that you don't take someone out of a sleepwalking state unless they're going to do anything dangerous is because it can create a reactive issue between being awake and being asleep, and the person increases the probability that the person might lose consciousness, meaning that they might stop breathing or something like that because the body gets so confused that it triggers itself off. Okay, so those are the risks when we're dealing with people who have sleep terrors and sleepwalking, or what they call this REM behavior disorder. All right. So that's sleep. Does anybody have any questions about sleep, dream states, different sleep disorders? Madison, can narcolepsy be cured? No. It can be medicated. Interestingly, for the example, in my dad's case, they put him on an ADHD medication, Ritalin, and that helped him. But I am going to say this, and this comes from experience working with people like my dad and other people with narcolepsy. Ritalin allows the individual to experience consciousness and be in an awake state when they're supposed to be awake. And when you have someone who has spent the majority of their life sleeping, they can go through a lot of trauma being awake and conscious of their world. And so if you have someone who has narcolepsy, don't do just the biological treatment of Ritalin. And there's another pretty hefty medication they put them on while they sleep to prevent sleeping issues, sleeping terrors, those kinds of things, and sleepwalking. When you have a person who is being regulated by medication that makes it so that they're consciously awake all the time, it's really important to make sure that they're getting counseling and therapy as well, because all of a sudden they're waking up to a world that they used to be able to sleep through. And so I'm just putting that out there as far as narcolepsy, and it can be treated, but it's not curable. Does that answer your question, Madison? Okay. All right. Good. All right. Any other questions or comments before we move on to this last part? Should I start making you all do dream journals? See what happens? Just kidding. Maybe if this was a human consciousness class and we were spending the whole semester, I'd make you all do dream journals and see how interesting our lives are when we're asleep, but we won't worry about that now. Okay. All right. What I wanted to spend the rest of our class talking about is when we alter our consciousness without using medication or sleep states. And the two most common forms of alters of consciousness are hypnosis and meditation. Okay. So what can we say about this? Attention to suggestion may alter consciousness in hypnosis. Altered consciousness can be involved in tense meditation, drug-induced hallucinations, as I hope the lecture from Tuesday showed, or hypnosis. Okay, these are all altered states of consciousness that occur when external world seems much more or less clear to us than usual, and when our thoughts are much more or less organized than usual. This is when we're most susceptible to things like hallucinations, meditation, and hypnosis. And this is also why things like mindful meditation and meditation help with people who are suffering with anxiety and depression. Because with both of those disorders, you have a confusion about reality. You're wondering, for example, in depression, why everybody else in the room is happy, but you're not. When you're having anxiety, you're wondering why everything is calm and perfect in this world, but you're having this anxiety reaction like everything's falling apart. And this makes it so things like hypnosis and meditation are helpful with those types of disorders, because there's that disorganization between what the person is experiencing and what really is happening or experiencing in the world. Okay. So let's talk about consciousness and hypnosis. Again, there's this different suggestions. Hypnosis is a social interaction during which a person responds to suggestions and changes memory, perception, and or voluntary actions. Okay, and this is an important statement about hypnosis. Is that it seems like it's this voodoo type thing that a person can put someone under their control and control them who they are. But when we look at hypnotic suggestion, the people who go under hypnosis are the kind of people, or the people who allow themselves to accept suggestions and instruction from other people. So it's kind of a letting go of your own inhibitions and allowing someone else to tell you how you should be feeling, behaving, and acting. And that's what hypnotic suggestion is, and why some people are more suggestive than others. When I've come to a hypnotist show, I'm never chosen as one of the participants, because I'm one of those individuals who feels like I need to constantly be in control of where I am and what I'm doing. And so even when I've tried to be hypnotically suggestive, it just doesn't happen for me. But I know other people who are very easygoing, want to go with the situation, they're having fun, they're just enjoying the process. And they're usually the ones that get called to go up and be on the panel that are going to go through hypnotic suggestion. Okay. And this brings about two other different theories. A social cognitive theory: hypnotized people are not actually in an altered state, but they behave in a way that is expected in that situation. Okay. And then there's the dissociative theory of hypnosis. Hypnotized people are in an altered state in which their awareness is separated from other aspects of consciousness. And if we look at these two theories, they actually can work together. Because in order to become susceptible and do what socially in the situation, you also have to give up aspects of your individualism, your individual person, and allow someone else to take control of that. So the way that I would read these two theories is they're not mutually exclusive. They're actually, if you combine the two, kind of create the situation of hypnosis. We do know that hypnosis can help people who can be suggestible to it. So, for example, hypnotic anesthesia, I can't pronounce that word, I'm sorry. Is a form of pain reduction that can be effective in treating acute pain, chronic pain, and recovering surgery. This is when an individual who might not have a lot of opioid receptors, they're very sensitive to pain. And so if they go in and do a minor surgery and they're hypnotically suggestible, this is one way that you can reduce the pain that the person is having. We think it may change the way the client is interpreting pain, because what we do know about pain is that it's a subjective experience, and that there's people who are very sensitive to pain, and there's people who are very resilient to pain. And we know that life experience, our experience with pain, deals a lot with how sensitive we are to it. And this lends to that dissociative theory of hypnosis. Okay. So that's hypnosis. And it can be effective if the person is hypnotically suggestible. It's something that shouldn't be practiced with people who still maintain a sense of control and self-awareness. It's not one of the best methods for things like pain or stopping smoking or memory recovery or something like that. So now what about meditation? Meditation is a practice in which intense contemplation leads to a deep sense of calmness, which has been described as an altered state of consciousness. I want to go through this. Okay, and so one of the big forms of meditation right now is this idea of mindfulness meditation. And so I'm going to focus on this one just for this kind of short conversation that we're having today. What occurs in mindful meditation is the person puts themselves in a relaxed state. And then when the person starts thinking about past experiences, such as what they did last week, or their conversation with their best friend or something, or if they start wandering into future situations, what am I going to do tomorrow? Why am I here at Grand Canyon University? What is this all about? Okay. When that person experiences that divergence, they redirect their mind to right here and right now. They try to resist thinking about their past and their future, and bringing the person right into the present and the present situation. Okay. Now, to state this as a tool to reduce things like anxiety symptoms, depression symptoms, and those kinds of things, mindful meditation has been shown to be very, very effective when it comes to reducing anxiety and depression symptoms. However, there are also long-term effects of mindful meditation that need to be addressed as well. Two of the findings is people who become practitioners of mindful meditation, so they're not using it to control anxiety or depression, they do it as a daily activity, tend to experience things like memory loss, tend to have reduced abilities to do cognitive planning. And we've also found that it actually increases individual scores on things like narcissism and egocentrism, where a person becomes very much just about themselves without thinking about the consequences of other individuals. So I'm just bringing this up because this is a very popular form of meditation right now, but it also needs to be taken into the context of short-term and long-term consequences, and take those kind of things into considerations. Now, I will say concentrative and transcendental meditations, they have a different effect than what we see in mindfulness. It's just, I find it very interesting that very little research has been seriously conducted on concentrative and transcendental meditation, but there's a large body of research on mindfulness. And I'm going to just state this again, very useful when you're dealing with an acute or a chronic problem, dealing with anxiety and depression. Long-term effects as a daily practice, its usefulness gets reduced because you end up having memory issues, decision-making issues, and you tend to become more narcissistic and egocentric in those contexts. So just some findings within this area. Okay, we do know that meditation does have the ability to alter consciousness, as we see here in this screen right here. When we meditate, a lot of focus starts to occur in this prefrontal cortical area. So remember, when we're in a dream state, this is kind of the area that shuts down. But when we're in a meditative state, this is the area that becomes very active. Okay. And then this is the stuff that we covered last